Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Hope everyone is doing alright. Let me check my volume. Always check your mic. I don't know how long this one is going to go. I'm trying to stop saying this one is not going to be long. I say that because I know there's a certain time horizon that people attention span can go. And I say that because I know there's a certain time horizon that people's attention span can go before they start to kind of, their eyes start to water. But that being said, a great clip. Shout out to Gordon DeMack because he gave me a heads up on this. So, I follow British politics. And in following British politics, there has been, you could say, a fuckfest called Brexit. In the same way of what takes place from fuckfest that's called Donald Trump. I'd argue that both of those things came from somewhat of the same place. Nevertheless, Brexit on their side, Trump on our side. Let's hop across the pond and talk about Brexit. Brexit has been somewhat amazing because it's the impossible dream at this point. Meaning the country has said they wanted to leave. The Conservative Prime Minister is stuck with this idea of, okay, we need to leave. We say we're going to leave. We put the referendum up for people to leave. Question, how do you do it? Half of your government is leave, half of your government is stay. Any plan that you get is going to trespass on somebody. How do you leave? And what the Prime Minister is finding is that she's having trouble trying to get aspects of her party to agree on anything that looks like some kind of real bill on leaving. The Prime Minister had a plan at Chequers. At Chequers, this was supposed to be the time where everybody comes together under this kumbaya moment where she grabs the Brexiteers and she sits them down at the table and the Remainers sit down at the table and there's a kumbaya moment and everyone walks out holding hands into the sun singing some kind of British melody. That didn't happen. That didn't happen at all. Boris Johnson quits. David Davis quits. I saw today somebody else quit. All of these people are quitting in protest. The defense minister quit in protest. Zombie Prime Minister walking. Theresa May's government has had to capitulate on multiple items put by the hard Brexiteers, some of which are time bombs that they made essentially blow up the deal in entirety. Mind you, the EU has already said that what Theresa May wanted to do was the impossible, the Narnia option. Theresa May is on Andrew Marr trying to defend her plan. Zombie Prime Minister walking. I keep saying she's a zombie Prime Minister walking because you have conservative elements of the government that are trying to get a no confidence vote for Theresa May, which may implode this government if they can do it. Theresa May has said she was going to fight for her government, but I'm just trying to get the point that, what do they call it? Dead man walking? Zombie Prime Minister walking. Let's take a look at this conversation she's having with Andrew Marr. Andrew Marr, for my American audience, is essentially a channel on the BBC. Marr is fired up in this interview. Marr is fired up. This is not a low energy Marr. This is an Andrew Marr that is aggressive and that is asking the Prime Minister questions that I myself have asked on this channel, and if I had the opportunity, I would ask for myself. Meaning, if the whole point of Brexit is to leave the European Union and you set out on this speech, this idea of the things that you were doing, you were going to take back sovereignty and all this other stuff. This plan to some degree makes you a vassal state, not just a vassal state. Part of the whole, the modus operandi of Brexiteers and even the Conservative Party at this point was we're going to have trade deals with the world. We're going to have trade deals with everybody. Any and everybody who want a trade deal, we're going to have a trade deal with. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make up the trade with the European Union by having trade deals. Now, that sounds great, but here's the problem. The deal that Theresa May is putting out will make that more difficult. How do you have a trade deal when you're still tightly wound to the trade with the European Union? Now, technically, it's possible, but it makes it more difficult. People gave Donald Trump shit about this when Donald Trump said, that I think he said something to the effect that she botched Brexit and that the trade deal is off. Well, he's saying the trade deal is off because they don't have the capacity to do both. If there's a regulation that the Brexit or the UK has to abide by. Well, it can't serve two masters. Can't serve two masters. There's a more fundamental point, though, that I think always hits at this thing of sovereignty. We're a sovereign government, talking about the UK, yes. You are going with this idea of Brexit. Yes, good. What if the UK, or what if the European Union changes one of their laws? Say, for example, you are getting something, say, for example, there's something that you're trading with the European Union with, and the European Union changes its laws. Now, what happens? If you don't change your laws, I'm getting to this point of this idea of there's no border and all this other stuff. That only applies if Britain always keeps a certain regulatory alignment. The moment that the regulatory alignment is broken, the border goes up. Border would have to go up. Now you're out of regulatory alignment with us. So clearly, we can't have the same trade relationship if you've broken regulatory alignment. Say that there was a drug. Say that there was a pill. Say there was something that you guys were getting. No, you guys were trading back and forth. And all of a sudden, the European Union says, we don't like that anymore. We're changing it. Say it's GMO foods. Say we found science that says this causes cancer and we're trying to avoid having this particular product in our country. Is Britain going to change their laws? And if Britain doesn't change their laws in order to kind of balance the scales on that, is a hard border going to go up between the two countries now that they're out of regulatory alignment, with Britain being okay with the product, but the EU not? This stuff gets fascinating. That's all. It's look, she's in an impossible position. She needs to meld two sides. The country is not even united on this. So she's in an impossible position. No, I don't feel sorry for her, but she is in an impossible position. Let's take a look at the Andrew Marr show. Let's hear her defend this plan. And again, this is a fired up Andrew Marr. I'm not going to show the entirety of this. I think I'm only going to show maybe 10 minutes or so. It's just enough so you can see the back and forth between Marr and Theresa May on this idea of sovereignty and on this idea of trade. This is awesome. And shout out to Gordon DeMack for giving me a heads up on this.
Standards that we wouldn't want to change any for them, but also I've got to be hard-headed and practical about this. To do trade deals around people voted against. So faced with that, we had an option. We could go for no deal, and I've been talking.
By the way, she is, from my perspective, she is clearly in this mode of, I am trying to sell this plan. I am doing my damnedest to sell this plan. And the people who are leaving the government and everything else is making it hard to sell this plan because it seems like I've capitulated. Let's let her make her case. I don't want to step on her.
With David Davis about the approach that we should be taking for some time.
I asked a very specific question. When did he know about the Common Law Book?
He knew. We have been talking about this for some time. But Andrew, you haven't allowed me to set out why what the European Commission proposed to us is unacceptable. And I want to do that because it's important.
But it's gone.
Because we have
it's gone all of that now, isn't it? We're in a new place. We're with this.
We're with that, but it's the reason we're with that. And I think a lot of people want to know why it is that we have put this proposal forward. It's because the European Commission's two ideas that they put before us, two proposals, were no good. On the one hand, it was what would have been for us a very poor trade deal, and would have kept Northern Ireland in the customs union, effectively carving Northern Ireland out in these terms from the UK. That's unacceptable to any government here in the UK. And on the other hand, what they call EEA+, which would have meant accepting free movement and accepting being in the customs union. Both of those are unacceptable. They're what people voted against. So faced with that, we had an option. We could go for no deal, and of course, no deal is still there, it's still possible. But I think that the best thing for the UK is to have a deal that sets a good relationship with our trading partners in the future. So if we were going to find something that was in Britain's interests, that delivered on the referendum and that was negotiable, we had to make what is a compromise, but is a positive in terms of the benefits that it gives us.
The trouble is that in doing all of this, you cut out the man you'd put in charge of the Brexit negotiations, and his department. They were working on a different plan. They had no idea about this common rule book, and you cut them out, and therefore he had no option but to resign, and he's clearly very angry about it.
No, let me be very clear that no department was cut out of these discussions. Discussions have been taking place for some considerable time. David Davis himself has been one of those.
David Davis knew about the common rule book.
David Davis, we have been discussing this option. David Davis was discussing with Michel Barnier. Michel Barnier had made clear to him the unnegotiability of the position that we had. So we had a choice. We could have said, well, let's stick where we are and see what happens, and risk actually ending up with a chaotic leaving, which I don't think is in people's interests. Or we could have said, OK, let's look at moving forward. Let's look at an alternative proposal, which we've put forward. But the benefits that this proposal brings are that it enables us to ensure we have friction-free trade for all those people whose jobs depend on integrated supply chains, on just-in-time processes. This protects those jobs. And on the other side, it enables us to do trade deals around the rest of the world.
I want to come to the reasons why you've done this in a moment. But before I do, there's an awful lot of Conservatives watching this programme, and members of your own party and members of your own government, who think this is a really bad deal. And the reason they think it's a bad deal is that it keeps us far too close to the EU. We've sort of left, but we then join round the back door. I mean, Boris Johnson has said, for instance, we are truly headed for the status of a colony. By surrendering control over our rulebook for goods and agri-foods and much else besides, we will make it much more difficult to do free trade rules. David Davis, who was in charge of this only a couple of weeks ago, says the common rulebook policy hands control of large swathes of our economy to the EU and is certainly not retaining control of our laws in any real sense. They're right, aren't they?
I recognise there are many people, there'll be people watching this programme, as there were those millions of people who went out to vote leave, who feel really strongly, who feel passionately about this issue, about leaving the European Union. And you know, many people who voted from the heart to leave the European Union. My job as Prime Minister is to deliver for them, but also I've got to be hard-headed and practical about this and do it in a way that ensures we get the best interests for the UK. Now, what this proposal, what this common rule book does, is it protects those jobs and livelihoods that do depend on those integrated supply chains, those just-in-time processes. It does deal with the issue of the Northern Ireland and Ireland border. But actually, these are rules that if you had, you know, some of our major manufacturers in this studio and asked them, Andrew, they'd say, we're going to stay by those rules. We're going to play by those rules anyway. And that's the point. This is a stable rule book.
The big problem.
Stable rule book that people would be having to deal with, having to use anyway in order to sell their goods to the European Union.
But the problem with the rule book, and that's why David Davis and Boris Johnson and indeed Donald Trump and Peter Mandelson are so upset with it, is that it doesn't allow us to do new trade deals around the world in the same way.
That's wrong.
You say that's wrong.
It does allow us to do new trade deals around the rest of the world.
Paragraph 163, in the context of trade negotiations, a common rule book for goods would limit the UK's ability to make changes to regulations. Now, that is exactly the problem. You say it yourself in your own white paper.
Yes, there would be regulatory standards, but actually some of these are regulatory standards that we wouldn't want to change anyway.
Now, two things that have taken place there. He's changed the wording. So he said it wouldn't allow us to do trade deals. And she said, well, no, it will allow us to do trade deals. He looks at it in your own document, it says it wouldn't allow us. Technically, in our own document, it says it would make it difficult to do trade deals, or make it more difficult to do trade deals. The language slid a little bit, but still, he has a point. Here's his point.
Because we've been, and as I've said consistently, no, we can change them. But let me come on to that. But this fundamental point about regulatory standards, that I've said that we want to continue to be a country that has high standards. This is something that has been consistent across government, that we want to continue to have high standards. So you could do trade deals where you tear up all our regulatory standards, but I don't think people actually want us to do that.
A very simple question.
Can I just, because there was another point to your question which I'd like to answer. Yeah. But of course, in what we're proposing, yes, we say we accept that, we accept those rules. The manufacturers will do it anyway. But yes, we say we accept those rules. But there's a parliamentary lock on that. Parliament would take that decision. And if there are any changes, it will be for Parliament to decide whether or not they accepted that change.
OK, let's take an example. So there's a lot of regulations, for instance, in the chemical and pharmaceutical industry. They're changing all the time. They come out of Brussels at great speed. in a few years' time, with a common rule book, one of those regulations we think is bad for our pharmaceutical industry, and therefore Parliament votes it down and we come out of that bit. What happens to the common border in Northern Ireland?
Well, the first question would be whether that particular rule was one of those that was covered by the Common Rule Book or not, because the Common Rule Book because the Common Rule Book is is attached to a very specific area of goods.
Let's assume we want to change an EU law.
We want to ensure that we are also on the issue of chemicals. We want to be involved in those agencies that are dealing with these rules, so that we're able to continue to have a say in those rules. What this does enable us to do is to have that frictionless border. We've made a commitment to Northern Ireland, and I know your question was if we want to change the rule. And
it's fake sovereignty. It's not real sovereignty, because Parliament knows if it tries to change the Common Rule Book from outside, the border goes back up again, which isn't acceptable to anybody. So in theory, we have the ability to change rules. In theory, we can go to Brussels and say, do you mind if we change these rules? In practice, once the Common Rule Book is in place, we can't.
Well,
and that's the point. That's the point. So that's the point in two catches. Three, actually, if you're talking about it. His point of sovereignty, are we really sovereign if we can change a rule, but we're hurt by a rule that we change? Meaning, if we're a sovereign nation, why are we being penalized in this way for a rule that we're changing from some external force? But on the second point, from the standpoint of the right and the standpoint of the left, this is also, to some degree, their point and their angst about this. If you're talking, I've heard Galloway argue about this, and Galloway's point is, if Jeremy Corbyn wanted to enact the government, or if he wanted to set the government up in the way that he envisioned, it would be illegal under the EU law. Think about that. You're a sovereign nation, and you're saying that you can't organize the government in the way you want to organize your government. You, the people of that nation, hire and elect representative to represent you, and you are told through some external body that this is not right, that you can't do this, this is frowned upon, or this is excluded under the way to which we operate our affairs. Think about that. So from the left, you can understand that this is somewhat problematic of an idea. However, from the right, who wants to cut regulations and cut, import, radiated chickens or whatever, you can understand for them who want to get rid of regulations, to them, they don't like this either. They want to be able to run government the way they want to, whether it's slash everything to hell and have this kind of libertarian hellscape, or a different society. Theresa May allows the worst of both worlds, meaning it's not Brexit, or it's Brexit, but it's not really Brexit. It's Brexit in name only. And I just think it's worse off. It's worse off. It doesn't give you back sovereignty in a way that a nation state would have sovereignty. And you're still attached. But you're not even attached in a way where you're fully enacting or directing policy. Marr is right here. If the EU changed one of their regulations, or the UK wanted to change one of their regulations, and those things came into conflict with one another, is a border going to have to go up? Let's hear Theresa May answer this. I think Marr is on to the point here. I think this is kind of, I don't think people fully understood the details of Brexit. Nobody did, because nobody really argued what it meant. But I think if you ask people, and they really came down to a bare bones, national sovereignty was probably one of the highest issues associated with why people left. You can imagine people will be pissed off if all of this takes place and they don't get that back. Let's hear Theresa May make her point.
Well, some people have raised this issue about what the parliamentary lock actually means and what power it gives to Parliament, and have said that they're worried that Parliament would never make decisions like this because of the consequences.
Yes.
Decisions have consequences.
By the way, this runs in line with the whole Brexit thing in and of itself. It's like, yes, you have the option of leaving the European Union, but will you leave the European Union? You get to this thing that it's like it's theoretical sovereignty of this case, and I understand what Marr is saying. I think Marr has a point here. I want to hear Theresa May answer though.
Parliament doesn't sit there and make decisions with it not having any impact. So if we're changing a rule book, if we're changing an element of a rule book, if the EU says, here's a rule on this manufactured goods, we want to change it in the future. Hasn't happened, actually. This is a stable area of rules. They've been stable for many years now. But if they did say they wanted to change something, Parliament would know that there would be a consequence, but Parliament would be the body that would making the decision.
That's why it seems
the
to me
EU
to be
could
theoretical sovereignty,
no, it's
not real sovereignty.
It is real sovereignty, because what happens today...
Can I ask a very simple question to cut through this? Let me try and cut through this. A very, very simple question. Does this common rule book make it harder to strike trade deals around the rest of the world or not?
The common rule book enables us to strike trade deals around the rest of the world.
Does
when
it
we
make
do
it harder?
those, no, when we do those, this is a really important...
Does it make...
That answer is yes. That answer is yes. It's in your own document. The answer is yes. It's in your own document. The document that Marr had his hands on, he read to you, whatever that paragraph was. The answer is yes. Just say yes, yes. It makes it a little bit more difficult to do trade deals. Yes, yes. Unequivocally, yes.
Make it harder.
It's a really important issue, Andrew, because what means that sometimes there will be questions about aspects of trade deals around the world it's about the standards that we want to employ here in the United Kingdom. And there are standards that we will abide by here in the United Kingdom, actually regardless of whether there's a common rule book with the European Union. And those standards would affect our ability to do trade deals around the rest of the world.
Donald Trump said that this would kill any possibility of a big free trade deal with the United States.
No, I spoke to the President Trump about this.
And then he changed his mind again, and he said he didn't resolve from his original statement, and you'd have to do a carve-out. Carve-out was his phrase from the common rule book. Is that possible? Do you know what that means?
Yes. Well, carve-outs are things that are done in trade deals around the world.
So you can carve out part of the common rule book before we've even negotiated it.
So if you do a trade deal with another country and you have in certain areas standards that you want to abide by that they don't, then you can have a carve-out within that trade deal. And that's an issue that will be other countries will want to discuss with us from their terms, that we'll discuss with them in our terms, because this is about the standards that you want to abide by as a country. That's what's really important.
Another area that really worries Conservative MPs at the moment is the sense from this, and again it's in black and white here, that we will be under the influence of the European Court of Justice.
Okay. The rest of this goes beyond the scope of where I wanted to go to. Theresa May tries her best to defend it. Marr, aggressive in this one. And again, Marr is right here. I mean, to some degree, there is this thing of a loss of sovereignty, or at the very least, her doing a deal that's not necessarily the best of deals. I mean, people voted for Brexit. I saw DeMatt kind of made this point about UKIP going up their membership, like overnight membership just skyrockets. They felt that they didn't get the deal that they were, put it this way, they felt they didn't get what they wanted when they voted for Brexit. So that's going to be fascinating to see what takes place. The EU isn't working for the UK, working people, simple as that. Pat Hacker, yeah, I agree. I think it's the same thing, the Trump phenomena. Nova Skitarian Winter, white paper equals useless stalling tactic. No one will agree. Yeah, she knew it when she drafted it. Well, you heard him say that she hid, or they hid part of it from one of the Brexiteers and kind of sprung it on him at the last minute. And she's like, no, I didn't do that. No, I didn't do that. And Marr is like, yes, you did do that, Prime Minister. And she does not want to own up to this will be make it harder for trade deals. I don't know if Theresa May did this knowing full well that they were going to reject this document and she was not going to get anything passed. There's another video that I want to do where Theresa May capitulated, allowing certain amendments to be added that in no way the EU is going to allow. It's almost like she set a time bomb of sorts, or she allowed the right wing of her party to put a time bomb in that document. So stay tuned, keep an eye on it. Theresa May does her best to defend her Chequers plan to Andrew Marr, at the very least in this video, on the context of sovereignty, and on the context of the UK being able to usher or issue other trade deals. So I'm going to end this here. To use May's own words, this is a dog's Brexit. A dog's Brexit. And I'm going to end it on that because this is a dog's Brexit. That is right. I look at this and I think to myself, You should have just stayed in the UK. I mean, you should have just stayed in the European Union. That's how bad this deal looks. They are depending on stuff that doesn't exist. That's how bad this deal is. There's stuff that the EU has already said, yeah, that's a no-go because that's an unworkable plan. And Theresa May just put both of them in one document and say, here we go, let's run with it. Let's run with it. It's giving more credence to me for those people who said, dude, she is not trying to push for Brexit. She doesn't believe in it. She wants to keep them into the UK. Keep the UK into the European Union. And she's gone for, as you say, Garden, a dog's Brexit. Something that you know would be voted down. We will see. She could shock the shit out of all of us and opt to take the country out in a hard Brexit. I don't necessarily know if she has the votes for a hard Brexit. We'll see. All right, guys. I'll put the link at the bottom so you can see the show for yourself without my intrusion. And you have a good one. Thanks, everyone.